One of the ultimate films of the 50s, one of the most informative works about a place in time, what Rear Window is to the immediate surface idyllic post-war America, few epochs share a genuine equivalent. The technical proficiency of Rear Window has earned it a place in the film canon quite assuredly, although I think much of the focus on the film is gravitating toward it as a piece of social commentary, analysis, psychocriticism, or even attempting to unravel Rear Window itself as a manifestation of some obsession at the base of the modern post-war suburban peoples. I'm of a mind that it is more a screenplay elevated than a screenplay masterstroke. I think the potential of the script is emphasized and entirely added by Hitchcock, and whilst the dialogue is relatively good, the film's distracted atmosphere, the racing concerns of James Stewart's L.B. Jeffries shooting through his brain, leads our attention away from the conversations which flash the film's social observations, and more into how those behaviours are part of a wider cultural tapestry, indicated by Hitchcock's intensely informative and detailed frames, his lucid visual storytelling. Hitchcock places John Michael Hayes' reasonable but mostly unsubtle character interactions in the context of a particular community, not just that which we see, but America at large, indicated by visitors such as Lisa, Stella, and Tom. Within this hypernormal representation of suburban American, or developed post-war American, or apartment block existentialism, the inorganically telling dialogue of Rear Window is the only discourse which feels appropriate in this pathologically magnified, inflated depiction of confused, uncertain, second-guessing American dreams. I suspect that Rear Window's reputation came from how much it was holding up over the decades. My own appreciation of Rear Window has a lot to do with how rewatchable it is, and how it only seems to become more entertaining the more you are noticing the directorial tapestry. The film received a positive assessment at the time, but Hitchcock wasn't exactly universally considered a profound artist, more of a populist executant. Over in Western Europe, in France, they were slightly ahead of the curve on Hitchcock's analysis from Eerie, although whilst I have no concerns over Hitchcock's embrace within these dimensions, it can be considered totally deserved, I would always enviably admire the respectful, convicted and seamless way in which Rear Window is what we might call an act of popular modernism. Rear Window is modernist in the more gallery sense, to a certain extent, although its fundamental gravity is popular entertainment, and if any work of art attempted or effectively manages to meet these two universes halfway, I would nominate it as Hitchcock's Rear Window and potentially a few of his other films, particularly Psycho. It not only draws attention to the attributes of the film form, is still confident in its ability to entrap a viewer within its drama and its depicted world, is employing such technical means as a reflection of how the drama disassembles the exalted norms of that post-war American idealism. Rear Window's lovingly cynical speculations on the tragicomic inevitabilities of American family life are at the core of the presented dialogue. Considering that the plot is about a potential murder behind closed doors, so much of the script is concerned with the foibles of American potential homeowners. The actions of Lars Forwald are ultimately depicted within the context of a prism featuring many stages of modern American marriages, many outcomes which could befall these, from the blissful top right balcony displaying two parents and a smaller child, to the childless dog owners who enjoy the fresh air of a cool nighttime, to the newlyweds who gradually grow to expect archetypes rather than each other, that jaded songwriter who eventually finds his muse in the once tragic Miss Lonelyheart, or that gorgeous ballerina whose male visitors may have been a hair less innocent or frivolous than were inferred once her husband arrives back from army service. Rear Window's script and Hitchcock's rendition of it is certainly coy and may not have anything poignant to share beyond a rather considerate cynicism, although I have no doubt that certain psychoanalytic jargon will sufficiently pamper such cynical dispositions with possible surface-level profundities. I am less impressed the more I assess film screenplays or texts in general as displaying cynicism without a solution. Perhaps the tragedy is the point, in which case the emotion and humanity is the purpose of the piece, although the smug smirk which is pictured on Hayes or Hitchcock dissolves the belief in Rear Window's supposed sympathy. In this text, the social observations may even be depicted as even endearing and not potentially condescending. After all, Hitchcock himself is admitting inherently to finding the act of voyeurism fascinating. It is a self-deprecating humour which permeates Rear Window, and he's inviting the masses to share in with it too, assessing their own foibles as well as that of those around them, celebrating a kind of humanism in a way. And there is a moral core beneath it. The conviction of Jeffries, Lisa, and Stella to bring forward the justice at a great risk to them dispels an ethical engine which is activated in such extreme moments. They do not obsess or leer at the crime as though it were an instance reminding one of the Kitty Genovese case. We could claim that they behave uncharacteristically just for regular people. But then Rear Window is hypernormal, remember? Although, even if the efficacy of the players is exaggerated, it is because Hayes and or Hitchcock believes it lies dormant there in the first place, as well as an occasional predilection to murder. Though Forward can be said to be an outlier, he is also more of an implied philanderer than the ballet dancer, actually. The ballet dancer may have been as loyal as Penelope, for all we know. That could be a judgment upon us for assuming she was at all unfaithful to her partner. Rear Window is a Hitchcock film I find utterly rewatchable, which, as I said, may have contributed to its legendary reputation among film fans, rewatching it on television or at screenings over the years. It isn't that the first time you saw it you necessarily adored it more than you simply admired it. Maybe viewers who viewed it as brand new and totally modern and not as an artifact, however tasteful or maybe timeless, from the eventually distant past, had immediately entirely adored it. Rather, Rear Window has entertained one so many times, someone who saw it in the 60s may have seen it up to 4 times by the 90s or 2000s and felt it was one of the greatest films of all time. How many other films from the 50s hold up, as well as Hitchcock's from this era? I think when one first sees Rear Window, they may question if it is that brilliant compared with its enormous reputation. It gained the enormous reputation via how well and easily it held up on repeat viewings, because once you know exactly what to expect from Rear Window, or what you assume to expect, the genius becomes so apparent, the genius being tied to the entertainment factor. Rarely has a film socio-analysis, analytic subtext, been so imbued with the general entertainment resonating from itself. The intellectually dissected qualities of Rear Window are distilled in the more accessible components of itself. There is no frivolous window dressing. It all colludes into an exercise in common though sharp psychosocial critique, which becomes the entertainment quality itself, as it ties in with the tense speculation on how a murderer, Forwald, committed the crime, why, and how they can prove the act and bring this dangerous, evil person to justice. Our interest in others can cross boundaries, and it can also be the cause of a criminal being brought to deserve justice. It can be trivial entertainment, or it can be dehumanizing and perverted. Rear Window displays it all. And if Hitchcock or Hayes were to be criticized for celebrating this too callously, they cannot be accused of condescending or acting as the noble superiors to their audiences, to those they wish to entertain. For those they seek to entertain are presented with an honest presentation of human pathologies, which both critiques and expresses fondness for such regular instances of possibly inconsiderate reductions of fellow humans. In fact, the director presents his intents as being not dissimilar to the curiosities of the characters in the film itself, so audiences walk away from Rear Window maybe re-evaluating themselves within a continuum of behavioural potentialities, from righteous to jaded to eccentric to status-seeking to a heinous criminal/murderer. It is an incredibly impressive film, and one I'll forgive for not offering a path around humanity's lack of strict respect for one another's lives, as it chooses to celebrate the occasional vices that have us seeing other humans as manifestations of our needs. Presents a playful compromise as a meeting halfway point, though has no hesitation to identify where humanity descends into true, unignorable, dangerous evil. And its depiction of evil is worth a mention. Forwald is a weak man, a scared man, not a diabolical man, but a man pushed to his limit. The relation between Forwald the observed and Forwald the pleader, confronting Jeffries in his home, is one of the most fascinating representations of a criminal's pathology in the history of human art, both then and now. One of the more exalted film classics, which I find myself swept up willfully in the traditional and hokily rite of passage for film fans hype of, Hitchcock's Rear Window is among the most admirable acts of popular entertainment ever accomplished, and though apparently the ridiculed author Chris Dumas once claimed that, quote, one of the primary errors in Hitchcock criticism is the unconscious tendency to ascribe to Hitchcock in Rear Window the kind of modernist use of the frame that Antonioni introduced 6 years later in La Ventura, unquote. It is hard to imagine that Hitchcock had no awareness for the frame as a psychological apparatus/scope into a submerged psyche. He worked with Salvador Dali on Spellbound, and was the only mainstream filmmaker to perhaps readily do so with any of those surrealists either. Then later, the man directed Vertigo. Are we entirely sure he didn't see the potential? A vocal admirer of Fellini Antonioni, Hitchcock was, certainly by the 60s. Hitchcock's choice to be a popular spectacle enabler and not to procure the reverence of Western European art critics has confused some English language, philosophic, continentally inclined wannabes, But part of the daunting accomplishment of Hitchcock was to dazzle both the masses and those snooty French his critics both. The suggestion that he had no consideration of the so-called modernist use of the frame is at least as superfluous as claiming that he always was, and at least in his on-record admiration of Antonioni, we can at least assume that he at one time considered the possibility, or a very similar, shared, incidentally matching ideas. In an attempt to conclude this piece, I keep opening it up again, so I'll just close it here, read it over, make sure it makes a little bit of sense, and add to it if I feel it is required.